I followed my mom's advice and complained to my dad about college costs. She lost child support, and I got my revenge. Disclaimer: this narrative is not intended to undermine the experiences of single mothers or individuals with mental health conditions. And yes, I do care for my mother, but this recounts how one's actions can eventually have consequences. To give some context, my parents separated while I was in kindergarten, so I was 6 years old or younger. My mother gained full custody of my sibling and me, and she struggled with mental health challenges. I suspect she has borderline personality disorder and displays characteristics of a typical narcissistic parent. Since the divorce, she constantly expressed to us that it was not her fault we lacked sufficient money for basic necessities and directed blame at my father. For instance, if there was nothing for breakfast and we voiced our hunger as young children do, she would retort, "It's your father's fault, so go complain to him." As a result, I learned to suppress my complaints and make do with what I had, spending my formative years caring for her. From the time I was around 8, my sister was 10, we were conditioned to return home from school, complete our homework, clean the house, and take care of ourselves. We were instructed not to ask our mother to prepare meals but rather to do it ourselves, ensuring all household chores were handled so that she wouldn't have to lift a finger. It may sound strange, but we believed this was normal, along with enduring daily criticism that we were worthless. Things deteriorated in my senior year of high school. My grandmother passed away a few months prior to that summer, and my mother resigned from her job, rapidly depleting the funds my grandmother had left her, which was roughly $75,000 back in 2000. She refused to seek a new job and consistently created excuses not to work, e.g., "I need some time off, leave me alone, I hurt my leg," etc., while she went out drinking with friends, behaving like a carefree teenager. Therefore, during my senior year, I dedicated myself to my studies, worked part-time after school, and essentially took care of a grown-up who would not work or contribute. Whenever a utility was shut off or food was scarce, she would complain, "You have a job. Why can't you pay for it?" If I mentioned that my father sent her child support, she would simply complain about having to pay my sister's tuition, which I later realized was not true. She would boast about receiving that child support check, laughingly referring to it as "mommy's paycheck." Moving forward to the time I was preparing to select a college, my mother continued to grumble about expenses while, naturally, having saved nothing in a college fund. I couldn't afford a private university since I received only a partial scholarship, so I chose to attend a reasonably priced yet reputable state university. In my freshman year, I managed to cover the costs of tuition and on-campus housing because I completed my taxes and free application for federal student aid, FAFSA, promptly, leading to a substantial amount of grants. During my first year of college, I nearly lost my financial aid for the following year. Why? My W-2 forms were sent to my home address, and my mother, being the loving and supportive parent she was, shredded them and discarded them. I discovered this thanks to my sister being home that weekend. My mother denied it, and when I returned for spring break and pressed her about it, she lied and claimed her friend had them. Her friend was a certified public accountant. My sister confronted our mother with this falsehood by contacting the friend, who stated she did not possess any of our tax documents. Concerned, she advised my sister and me to request duplicate W-2 forms to be sent home so that our mother could forward them to me. My mother was furious that we checked with her friend and called her out on her deception, but true to her word. Her friend assisted me with my taxes and FAFSA. I had offered compensation or babysitting, but she declined, likely recognizing my mother's instability and empathizing with my sister and me. At this juncture, I discovered that my mother had not been supporting my sister with tuition as she had claimed, and my sister informed my father, who confronted her and demanded to know where the child support was going. My mother maintained that he wasn't providing her with adequate funds, which was the reason she could not assist us. During my second year of college, my W-2s were once again sent home, and my mother, accidentally, disposed of them again. I had to request duplicate copies from my summer job not just once but twice since she kept discarding them. Consequently, I filed my tax return late that year, resulting in my FAFSA also being submitted late, meaning I did not receive the full amount of aid I had previously obtained. Whenever I expressed concerns to her about finances or the lack of food in the household, her response was, "Complain to your father." That summer, before my 3rd year, I was worn out from my mother's nonsense. I was working full-time that summer and saving diligently, yet she refused to assist me with food or anything else while I was at home. She was upset that I chose to allocate my hard-earned money toward a cell phone bill, instead of paying the phone bill for her long-distance calls to her online friends while she spent all day in chat rooms. This was during the dial-up internet days. She claimed I should just drop out because I was not trying hard enough, despite being in the honors program, and played the victim to her friends, lamenting, "It's so difficult when your kids are in college, and they consume all your resources while asking for money." By the end of summer, I had saved $1,000, but the university would not allow me to move into the dorms unless I paid 50% up front, which amounted to about $10,000. I was unsure how to proceed, as the university had assured me all summer that I was fine, only to inform me on move-in day that I could not take residence in the dorm. I called my father in a panic, and he spoke to someone who agreed to give me 24 hours. I moved in, and the following day, my father appeared with coffee and a donut for me, assuring me not to worry, he would resolve this situation once and for all. We visited various offices on campus, and he co-signed a loan, which he later repaid, and paid the remaining balance on my tuition that the loan did not cover. He then took me out to lunch and shared the truth. My mother had not supported my sister's tuition, as she claimed. My sister graduated the summer before my junior year. My sister later confirmed this, but was not surprised by our mother's dishonesty. My father had co-signed a loan to support my sister, which he also paid off, and my sister received a scholarship and worked in a cooperative program to pay for her final 2 years. He also informed me that my mother was not as financially strained as she portrayed herself as part of their divorce agreement. He was responsible for covering the mortgage and property taxes on our home, and even though my sister was now independent, he was still paying her the same amount of child support, around $2,000 a month, despite the fact that I was living on campus for the majority of the year and my mother was providing me with nothing. For context, my tuition and room and board before financial aid was applied amounted to $15,000 annually, so she could have easily assisted me with my education since, after receiving financial aid, the balance I usually owed was around $6,000. I was hurt to realize that my mother was merely living off my child's support while perpetually making me feel guilty for wanting anything or for not being able to fulfill her every demand. She would become upset if I didn't come home on weekends to assist her with a house that I wasn't living in. I reflected on how she made me feel growing up and the sense of worthlessness she instilled in me when, in truth, without my sister and me, she would have been homeless after the divorce. My father asked for access to my account to demonstrate that my mother was not funding my college education, and that I was. He asked how I would feel if he took care of my college expenses instead of sending child support to my mother. That sounded appealing to me. He even mentioned that I could spend my breaks at his home instead of my mother's. I called my mother to inform her that my father had resolved the issue, and she showed no remorse. She accused me of being at fault for failing to manage my finances better and criticized me for wasting my summer earnings. I feigned ignorance and agreed with her, although I pointed out that I had followed her advice and complained to my father. A month later, my mother called, enraged. My father had discussed matters with the courts, and there was to be a hearing regarding their divorce case. He had established that my mother had not been funding either my or my sister's college education, and that was precisely why my father was obligated to continue paying child support until I completed college. Since I was living on campus, it made no sense for him to pay her child support when I was not residing at home for most of the year, and she had not given me a cent. My father told the judge that he would gladly cover my college costs, but would no longer pay my mother child support or cover the mortgage on the house. If my mother didn't take over the mortgage, they could sell the house, and I could stay with him during breaks. My mother was frantic over this and called me selfish. I reminded her that my tuition likely exceeded what she received in child support, as she had never been able to assist with my educational expenses. She continued to lay guilt trips on me, claiming that I was selfish for wanting to go to college since she never had the chance to attend immediately after high school, expressing how she did not enjoy four carefree years of university. I pointed out that she had not been employed since my grandmother's death nearly 3 years prior, while I had been working and studying during that time, allowing her to live a carefree existence. At that point, she unleashed her fury on me. She attempted to retaliate against my father by neglecting to pay the utility bills for the house to create the illusion that she needed the money. She informed me that the electricity and water had been shut off, so if I wished to return home for winter break, I would have to assist her financially. She had moved in with her boyfriend at his condo. I simply told her that I would miss her, but planned to stay at my father's during winter break. She was furious and cried about how selfish I was for not wanting to come home for Christmas. Just as a side note, the previous Christmas, she had discarded many of my personal belongings. Why? She was angry that I didn't want to come home for the weekend to help her clean because returning involved taking 2 buses and 2 trains, costing $20 one way, and waiting for her to hopefully remember to pick me up at the train station, a mere 20-minute drive for her after I had spent 4 to 5 hours traveling. I assured her that I would help clean for the holidays once I returned during winter break. Her reaction: she packed up all my things, put them in boxes, and tossed them onto the front lawn. Most of my belongings were ruined after being left in the rain. I informed my mother that I would visit her during winter break once the utilities were restored. I kept my father informed about the situation, and he expressed excitement that I would be staying with him and offered me a job in his office for the break. He also called my mother to remind her that the child support payments had not ceased, and they planned to list the house for sale soon, questioning her claims about the utilities being shut off. Enraged, she somehow found the funds to reactivate the utilities. That spring, my father formally took over my college tuition through the court, ensuring that I received my full financial aid since he handled my W-2s for me. My mother lost her child support and was instructed by the judge to cooperate in the sale of the house and to maintain the utility bills so it could be sold. Her boyfriend moved in with her until the house was sold, after which she relocated to a different time zone. The ultimate irony: it actually cost my father less to pay for my college expenses than to provide child support to my mother. To sum up, my mother exploited and mistreated me, and I exacted my revenge by causing her to lose her child support and free housing by doing what she had instructed me to do for years: complain to my father. I have no regrets. Edit. I appreciate all the comments and upvotes. Many of you have inquired whether things are better now. It depends on your definition. I am not as close to her as I am to my father and stepmother, with whom I developed a closer bond after college and remain strong to this day, but I still maintain a relationship with her. We converse, but I have learned not to trust her since she often disappoints me. For example, a couple of years ago, she stood me up on my birthday. Now, I do not include her in my birthday or holiday plans. Some have also asked how she treated us while growing up. She wasn't entirely problematic, but her negative moments were quite severe. I acknowledge that I have encountered many who have been through worse, so I remind myself of that. After college, she tried to manipulate me using the same pity tactics she had previously used. She attempted to persuade me to move from New Jersey to Tennessee. She relocated before my final year of college without informing me or my sister at all. She just left. Although I liked the area, I told her I would look for a job and consider her offer to temporarily reside in her guest bedroom. Immediately, she began to lay guilt on me, so I ended the conversation. She then called my sister to complain that I have a daughter who doesn't wish to take care of me. My sister and I both found that humorous. She wasn't even 50, in perfect health, and refused to work. There was no way I was going to move in and care for her. Throughout my adult life, she oscillated in and out of mental health facilities, trying to convince us that either we wanted to live with her or she wanted to live with us. Eventually, she took residence in my grandparents' former home in Philadelphia. They had passed away years prior. She neglected repairs and had to sell it for below its worth, and subsequently stayed in various relatives' guest rooms, making excuses to avoid working. Ultimately, she overstayed her welcome and ended up in a hospital and then a shelter, and she now resides in subsidized housing. It's a charming apartment with a loft style, but she still complains about her dire circumstances and how no one wants to take her in. Thank you once more for all the supportive words, upvotes, and messages. I acknowledge that my upbringing was far from ideal, but I always keep in mind that many others have faced worse situations. I was fortunate to have my father and sister. Going through such challenges has taught me to be resilient and to rely on myself.